Let's talk about you, Ty.
Okay.
Who are you? What is your life story?
Dang. Well, my name is Ty Hawton, for anyone who doesn't know. Uh, and I'm from Minnesota, is where I'm originally from. Though I've kind of wandered around in the last couple of years ever since my mission. I went down to Texas, went back up to Minnesota for a very short time.
Mm,
And then I went back down to Texas in a different area because Texas is very large. As much as people
it
like to
is.
make fun of it, it is a massive state. So, anyways, so I went back down to Texas. And then I went out to Ogden and I lived in Ogden for a very short time again. And then I finally came out to Provo. And now I've been in Provo for almost almost 4 years now. It'll be 4 years in September. So, but I was
Wow.
very lucky. I lived with this family called the Stouts and Burgers when I first moved out here, and that was the most amazing experience because I rent was only $50, and so
Yes.
that made me. It allowed me to save up enough money to get through school before I
Mhm.
started getting scholarships because the whole first year of school I paid for, and
Right.
because that family had taken me in, I was able to pay for that whole first year of school without taking out a loan and everything like that. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's really kind of them to do.
It
Um,
was.
yeah. So you're almost done school, right? Is this your last semester?
Yes, this is my last semester. I graduate in April. So I'm super excited. Though, uh,
Yeah.
since we're not doing like the live celebration, I'm a little disappointed that we're not doing the live celebration, but that's okay. So
Hmm.
I'll probably go over and celebrate with
Yeah.
my brother and sister-in-law. So
You can do like a nice walk down, I don't know, a forest path,
yeah, or just eat really good
have your own
food.
little, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It'll be a fun time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So you've been studying playwriting, is that right?
Yeah, so I've been studying playwriting. I actually did not originally start off at BYU as a playwright. I
Mm.
started off as a English teaching major. So while I was kind of out on my mission, uh, the higher ups, they always are encouraging you to think about what life will be like afterwards.
Hmm.
So, and I loved writing and stories, and I
Yeah.
had an English professor.
Mm.
His name was oh wow, I forgot his name.
Oh,
Anyways, if I recall it, then I will say it.
good.
Mr. Polson. His name was Mr. Polson,
Okay.
and he would always like when people would make him mad, he'd pretend to poke them in their eyes from far away like this, and I just loved him. I loved the way he interacted with stories and things like that. So I kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps. But then
Mm.
when I came out here and I took a couple English classes, I realized that in the teaching, they don't really train you at all how to write, you
Mm.
know? And that's kind of like what I was interested in because he also taught us how to write,
Mm.
but uh, I assume like they probably would a little bit, but probably more focus on like essays because that's also what Mr. Paulson taught me back in high school. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I want to do something where I create. And so originally I was thinking about doing screenwriting, and I
Yeah.
just was thinking about doing it like taking the classes. But you have to be a major to get into the screenwriting classes, or you have to email the
Um,
professor. And as a dinky freshman, I was way too afraid to email a professor and be like, "Hey, can I get into your class? I've never written before, really, but I'm interested in doing it." Uh, so, anyways, I took a intro to theater class instead,
mm.
and I ended up falling in love with it. And so slowly over time, I kind of bounced back and forth between trying to do performing versus doing writing. And then
Hmm.
finally, I was like, well, you know what? I really want to be able to create the stories that I want to tell instead
Yeah.
of interpreting other people's stories. And so I ended up going down the playwriting path.
A beautiful story
So,
and
yeah.
it's
So,
so what are those stories that you want to tell?
so the stories that I want to tell, it's going to sound really weird, except for I don't really know any other way to describe it.
Okay.
typically there's two genres of story that I really like to tell.
Mm.
Uh, One of them is like wacky comedy, like
Hmm.
it's just fun and things like that. That's what I actually started off writing. My first couple plays were these like crazy comedies, and one of them I haven't finished that I'm thinking about finishing. But the first one that I wrote was about a, an outlaw, like a cowboy outlaw, who
Oh,
double crosses his partners
oh no.
and steals all the money for himself, and then hides away in a theater, and he dresses as a woman to hide away in the theater. So that's what that story was about, and that one was just like so wacky. Like the lines aren't realistic at all. Like they're just
Uh-huh.
kind of out there as jokes.
Hmm.
But I've gotten a little bit more refined with my comedy, so it's not quite that way. But I do like that writing. And the other type of writing that I do tends to be very dark and gritty, and also very it tends to be quite violent. And when I say violent, I don't necessarily mean like like tons of blood and tons of gore. I mean, I consider violence to be something that can happen psychologically as
Hmm.
well, like uh, physically, like psychologically, all sorts of different ways that you can depict that on stage. And those have been the play that got me the most traction as far as a writer in
Hmm.
at BYU was called Modern Gladiator, and it was
Ooh.
about a 17-year-old prodigy wrestler who was trying to reconnect with his father through wrestling, but his father is a sociopath, and
Ah.
so his father kind of like abuses him and kind of is just
Mhm.
using him for his own means.
Mhm.
But his son loves him so much, and he just cannot let go of his father until the end of the play after he loses this big tournament. So, but that one deals with a lot of kind of this idea of abuse, and then the
Mhm.
wrestler, while he is kind of like this physical specimen and like this amazing wrestler, he really struggles psychologically. He struggles with self harm and other things like that. So that one's kind of a very intense play, and I would consider it a violent play. Not necessarily in the fact like there's a lot of blood or anything like
Mhm.
that. There's no blood at all, but it's just kind of very intense. And so that's the other type of writing that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah. Um, you got a spectrum, and that's great.
It's
Um,
not really a spectrum. It's more like, oh, here's this on one end and here's this on the other end. And then I guess you have like Everyman, which is
uh-huh.
like a show that would actually fall in between. So,
It's got dark humor.
oh
Um,
yeah,
it's about, well, I think Everman's a really interesting show because um, you meet death, and what do you do?
mm-hmm.
And it's not like this very serious, like, I'm going, like, death is coming, you are going to die.
Yeah,
Like, get over yourself kind of show. It's death is coming. You can try to run. You can make as many jokes as you want. You can try to get all these kind of crazy characters to go with you. But in the end, you are going to die. Um, so I think it is an excellent blend. What
and
was
let's
your
just say it's not the seventh seal. That's what it's not, but
exact
not quite
exactly?
that grim. So,
What was your process for Everyman
oh,
and doing the adaptation?
dang. So the process for Everyman is I worked really heavily with Megan Sanborn Jones.
Mhm.
She's the one who contacted me and asked me if I would adapt the show for her. And what I did is I really wanted to write a piece that she wanted to direct and that
Mhm.
she wanted to see on stage was
Mhm.
my number one goal was to provide something for her that she really enjoyed and she really wanted to see. So what I did is the first thing I did was I wrote three outlines. And my first idea that popped in my head, because she had contacted me and she's like, I really want the comedy to drive the action or something along those lines. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I was going back to my roots. I was like, let's do wacky comedy. Let's make this all crazy. And so I read the original script probably two or three times and I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I have it. But it reworked the whole entire script. Like the ending
Mhm.
was different, the characters were different. They were like, I imagined them being like way over the top, like
Ah.
just like way over the top characters. And then I wrote that outline, but kind of like to hide that that was my number one idea. I decided to write two other outlines.
Uh-huh.
One of them deviated a little bit, and one of them pretty much was exactly the same, with a slight twist, because in the original Everyman has to self-flagellate themselves in order to repent. And we weren't really I wasn't interested in adding that in, and neither was Megan. So kind of working around that in that final outline, that was like the only thing that changed in that third outline. So I sent those into her. She gave me feedback, and she's like, "Wow, that first one though, that's totally crazy." Like, and I was like, that one's that one's fast. Anyways, because she really wanted a show that was very close to the original,
Hmm.
and it took us. It the biggest thing that took me a while was to get the tone that
Hmm.
we were looking for in the original. Because when she said comedy, I really stuck onto that
Hmm.
for a long time in in part of the drafting process, because that's what I was going for comedy. I was going for like kind of like wackiness.
Hmm.
And as the meetings went on and as we met more and more, I realized that there was going to be comedy, but it was going to be more witty. It's going to be more subtle. But the overall tone for the show is kind of like this sweet, nostalgic tone is how I
Hmm.
would describe it.
Yeah.
And it took me a little bit to get that. So we ended up writing like 7 or 8 drafts
Yeah.
in about a month and a half, a little over a month and a half. So it was a lot of drafting. I tend to write, that just tends to be the style that I write in. Some people like to do a lot less drafting and things like that, but I tend to just like and just go over and do a lot of different drafts and to iron out kind of the wrinkles and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, but it was really working closely with her and kind of bringing out the magic in the show in the way that she wanted to be able to see it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you did a really excellent job. I know that one of Megan's goals for that she didn't know what she wanted until she saw what she didn't want. Um, and so like some of her goals that she realized through the process was a very close adaptation. Like she knew she wanted it to be modern, she just didn't know how modern she wanted it to be, um,
Yes.
which our audience will quickly find out. It's modern, but it's still very much Everyman.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that was really funny um, about it, because I had added in like a lot of slang
Hmm.
in the first draft, and she was like, "Nah, nah," which was pretty funny. But I think the one thing that we were always kind of on point about and kind of together with, and something that I really wanted out of the show, is the original Everyman. It doesn't give Everyman like very much of a character,
Hmm.
or very much of a character. It does kind of give him a character arc, but not really. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of just like if there is any, you'd really have to dig very very deep to see it. And what
Yeah.
I wanted to do with the writing process was I really wanted to give every one, is what they're called in this show,
Hmm.
uh, a character arc, like an arc where they personally change, and through their journey, they're able to go on this, have this internal change that happens in them, and not just the fact that they make it into, well, spoilers, okay. Um, Not just the fact. Well, I don't want to spoil it. I will. Okay. Not just the fact that they make it into heaven, like they do in the original story, because that's what it just feels like. It just feels like, oh, look, you made it. But I wanted there to be like an internal change that
Hmm.
allowed them to make it. So
Yeah.
that was kind of what I really wanted out of the show, and what I feel like Megan uh, really liked in a lot of the drafting and the
Yeah.
writing process. So that was hopefully that really comes out in the show.
I think it will. I guess the audience can give us their own thoughts later
Yeah.
about that. um, awesome. So, do you have a favorite moment or line from our new script?
So my favorite moment is is actually at the end,
Mhm.
probably, when everyone is going to go into their final reckoning, and they try to convince Charity, who's a character who's with them,
Mhm.
that they'll be okay if they just go by themselves. but Charity says that, you know, I care about you, I love you, and I want to go with you into your reckoning. And then they hold each other's hand and they walk into the reckoning, which is probably my favorite part of the show.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful moment.
Yes. So,
And it's different from the original. It gives that, it's kind of like the final little piece on the arc. You're like, yes,
yeah, yeah.
that's
I
the change.
really, I really enjoyed that moment, even
Yeah.
though it's not typically something that, if I were kind of like to come up with an idea myself and
Hmm.
my own kind of thoughts would be the impetus, I don't think I would have thought of that moment.
Hmm.
But uh, just kind of through the writing process, that one kind of came to me. And talking to Megan, that one was just kind of like a moment that I really, I really wanted a moment where they were able to connect with, where everyone was able to connect with Charity uh,
Yeah.
in a very intimate kind of way.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the challenges that you had as well when writing the script is that it was for a Zoom performance.
Yes, yeah. I do have to say, my writing, I've always felt like language is my weakest point as in
Hmm.
my writing, and I've really been trying to improve that, mostly because my vocabulary sucks. Like, and honestly, I was reading this autobiography by Alan J. Lerner,
Okay.
and Alan J. Lerner wrote Paint Your Wagon, uh, Brigadoon, My Fair
Hmm.
Lady.
Yeah.
He was the book writer and the lyricist for all of those musicals. And My Fair
Wow.
Lady is like one of the biggest musicals of all time,
Yeah. And I mean,
right?
that was an adaptation as well.
Yes, it was. And his father, when he was a kid, made him like learn a new word every week. And when he became a professional writer, his father would write him letters and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm super proud about this new play. Like, oh, My Fair Lady, like it's pretty good, but oh my gosh, how do you have such a small vocabulary and do your job? Like, how can you be a writer and not know that many words?" And I was like, "Wow!" And I'm like, I know less. I know less words than Alan J. Lerner, because when I was reading his book, there
Hmm.
was a lot of words that I did not know. So I'm like, great. His vocabulary is like bigger than mine, and so I tend to lean a lot. I've always tended to lean a lot more on action, but this
Yeah.
being over Zoom and Everyman being a very wordy play in and of
Hmm.
itself, kind of adapting it, I knew I was going to have to go in, and it was going to be a challenge for me because I was going to have to use language in a way that I had not used it before. So
Do you think you improved?
I think there are improvements. I think I've really like what I've done right now is it's in kind of the rehearsal process. So I've kind of just put it out of my mind. I'm sure
Hmm.
if I went back and I read it, I would just be like, oh, got to change that line, got to do this. But I have not gone back. I have not reread it since I turned in this last draft, and I will not reread it until after the show was done. So,
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
yep. So I don't want to have any doubts until someone writes about it and says it's good or it's bad. So
Wow.
yes.
Wow. Um, you know, one of the benefits of having a play like this is you can always go back and rewrite it one for the next show.
Yeah. So we will see how it goes, and I'm very excited. I'm very nervous. This is really my first uh time getting a show performed on a, a, a big stage. I
Yeah.
have done the small kind of activities here at BYU, like the 24-hour theater,
Yeah.
which is a 10-minute play gets shown, as well as I've had a couple like 10-minute plays performed. But other than that, I have not had a lot of my writing performed. I have won uh, awards for my writing,
Yeah.
uh, but that's slightly different than actually seeing it on stage. So, yeah.
It's a big day, big time.
Yes,
I don't know.
yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Um, so where are you headed from here with your writing career?
So, Uh, right now I'm working on a show with a friend of mine,
Mhm.
and we're telling the story of King John of Bohemia.
Ooh,
He was a king, I believe it was the 1300s,
okay.
and he had like a very crazy life. He was married when he was 14. Ended up taking over Bohemia for a little while, and then the nobles in that area hated him because he grew up in France, and
Um,
so the nobles in Bohemia, kind of like this Germanic area, they were like, "Oh, he's a foreigner. We don't like him." So he kind of got PO'd about that to the point where he left his wife and his castle to go off and crusade all across Europe, in
oh,
Russia,
no.
in Lithuania, in Italy, like everywhere, England. Like he crusaded in all these places, and he came back. And but the main thing is he actually went blind when he was 39 years old,
Ooh.
and he died about 10 years later. While he was blind, he charged this French battlement basically with two of his best knights and their horses strapped onto his horse together so they could lead him into the battle.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he ended up dying from that, but kind of like he had this blaze of glory, like final death. And that's what he's most famous for, is the way that he died. Not even the rest of the things. Like I had to look up all that and kind of study it, but
Uh-huh.
apparently like it's fairly well known. His death is like has gone down in history. Not everyone knows about him, but like a
Right.
lot of like love telling his story about how he died and things like that. Anyway, so that's where I'm going with that. But the other thing is as I've written more and more, I've realized that there's not really a whole lot of money in theater for new plays.
Yeah.
So I'm really starting to branch out and go into like the film television world.
Hmm.
And my goal is actually to get into television writing.
Okay.
I would really love to write for like a 30-minute, 22-minute episode cartoon.
Ooh.
I I love cartoons, and I think I can really I think I can pull off like I said, blend the comedy and
Hmm.
like kind of the dark together and do like kind of like dark comedy cartoons, kind of like Cartoon Network does. So I'm like
Yeah.
maybe I could find a an area in there that uh, they'd really appreciate in like my style of writing. So I'm really starting to kind of go off and break into the film realm a little bit. Though I will continue to write plays and do theater. I'm there's just new plays are just not like they're not really the jam in theater. Theater likes to do Shakespeare and like August Wilson and like
Yeah.
O'Neill, the oldies, which are like proven to work and proven to bring audiences in. But with film, you know, they do a shot or whatever, or they do a movie, and then you basically have to do a new movie. You can't like otherwise you're just going to be like showing the same exact movie over and
Hmm.
over again. And that's the thing about theater is while they do redo these stories over and over again, there's that slight difference in it. Like the
Yeah.
director can make a huge difference in it. The moment and kind of like the ephemeral nature of theater kind of gives it the ability to retell the same stories in a new and fresh way
Yeah.
that is not there in film. And so film kind of like requires you to continue making new content. So as a writer, it's nice to be able to continue making new content.
Hmm.
As kind of like a theater practitioner, it's super fun to be able to see plays kind
Yeah.
of take on a new life, even though they're the same words. So
Yeah. Well, best of luck for you in your all of your new adventures. I'm
thank you.
assuming that if anyone has questions, they can ask down below, and we'll send them to you, Ty, and you can field them.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds
I
good.
mean, yeah. But thank you so much for doing this project and for having this interview. And I hope you have a nice life.
Okay, I hope you do as well. Whatever you're doing, I know that you're doing a lot of dramaturgy work, so I'm sure.
Catch me at the libraries.
Yeah, the libraries, all the good stuff.
All the good stuff.